Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Elevate Your Running podcast. I'm so excited to be here this week, just like every week, but this week feels just a little bit more magical than other weeks. And that's because I'm recording this on Monday. I'm recording this on Marathon Monday, and that's just really exciting. We had the Boston Marathon earlier this morning. So if you're listening to this pretty closely after the episode drops, it's going to be just a few days ago. And what a spectacular race. What a spectacular morning, day experience. If you were there, like the entire weekend is just electrifying. And I knew I wanted to talk about the marathon in this week's episode. And I really was hoping that something would come to me in terms of like what to talk about. And if something didn't come to mind or come about from the race, I was just going to talk about the Boston Marathon recap. But we have so many different things to talk about today. And so I thought this would be a great episode to talk about the lessons learned from the 120th Boston Marathon that we can apply to our training. And I think this is going to be really great because there was a lot happening today. I was tracking nearly 30 athletes, and it was incredible to watch the progression and what was happening. I was had the ability to be able to watch it on TV this morning, which was also really amazing. Grateful that I have that flexibility to do that. I was checking plans. I was texting athletes. I was texting friends. I mean, there was a lot going on this morning. There was just so much energy, even from my little corner in Boulder, Colorado, watching it on ESPN. Such an incredible morning. So there's so much to cover. And I think there are things that happened in Marathon Monday for this year that we can definitely all apply, not just to our training, but also to our racing. And it doesn't matter what race distance you're going after. I think all of these lessons are going to be lessons that we can take away if we're training for a 5K, if we're running for the first time, if we're training for our first marathon, or maybe we're going after our first BQ, which is so exciting. So before we begin, I want to talk about and share an elevated moment from Kelsey. She reached out over Instagram. I don't coach Kelsey, but she is a listener of the podcast. And I'm not going to read word for word what she said because there's a little bit of personal information in here, but she appreciated just how much she's been loving and appreciating the podcast and binging it over the last couple of months. How many of us have been there? She's a new runner. So she says, I'm a new runner. I started a little under 2 years ago, and she ran her first half marathon about a year ago, but it just didn't go the way that she wanted it to go. It just ended up going and turning a little sideways. So she said, I was pretty anxious about trying the race distance again as a result, but have taken so much knowledge and motivation away from your podcast and have really put in the work over the last few months. And I ran my second half marathon yesterday with about an 11-minute PR and feeling awesome, and awesome's in all caps. Thank you for what you do. And I just noticed that came in at 11:11 on Sunday. So I love that so much. There's so much goodness in that elevated moment of one, getting back up after maybe you feel kicked down in a race or in training, right? Especially if you're a newer athlete. It actually doesn't even matter. But if you're going into a race and all of a sudden things are going sideways quickly, there's a lot to overcome with that. And to be able on your own to educate yourself, learn more about the process, and then go back into that same space and crush it with an 11-minute PR, that's huge. That's so amazing. And it's such a testament to training, to running, and maybe a lesson we're going to learn later here in this episode too. But maybe you're showing up to training feeling a little tired, burnt out, maybe you're just not feeling the same as you normally feel. If you're curious to know kind of what's happening on the inside of your body, Inside Tracker is here to help you. They will track up to 42 biomarkers to help you determine where you're deficient, where you're lacking, and what you can do to elevate those levels to get them in peak performance mode. And I think after today, don't we all want to be in peak performance mode, no matter what that looks like for us? So Inside Tracker helps us objectively measure our progress and refine and optimize ourselves in the process. You can save 25% off your entire order at insidetracker.com using the code SarahMPro25. That's SARAM as in Mary, Pro 25. And that's at insidetracker.com. Highly recommend an Inside Tracker test at least once a year. They've brought back different tiers. I know for a while they only had one blood test available and it was very expensive. They now have different tiers. So if you're working with a primary caregiver doctor, you are primary doctor, you can get your blood drawn from them and then use Inside Tracker to figure out where your levels are and what can help you set yourself up for the rest of the year. Oh, today was so great. It was so great for so many reasons. Both the men's and women's elite fields were electrifying. It was so fun to watch both. I unfortunately was watching on ESPN. If you also watched on ESPN, and shout out to Meg. Meg and I were texting back and forth this morning. The commentary wasn't great. Carrie Toffelson did an amazing job. She is she's a former pro runner. She's incredible. She's from Minnesota. She has a really great attitude. She knows what's up. So kudos to Carrie for really carrying that performance this morning. And if anyone from ESPN is listening, which I highly doubt, but you never know. Meg said it best, and I'm going to repeat what she said, and it's 2 words. Do better. All right. If you watched on ESPN, I'd love to hear your take on the commentary. And her name is Emma Bates and Sarah Hall, for the record. If you know, you know. But anyways, both races were incredible. The men's race was one for the record books because oftentimes in these races, we see the pack together, or there might be 2 smaller packs, but very rarely does an athlete or an elite runner go out and be ahead of the entire pack. And the first place winner, his last name is Lemmy. He had almost a 3-minute gap at the very beginning. And that's really unheard of because, one, it's very fast, right? He ended up running a 2:06, so not quite as fast as the fastest time at Boston, but he did go out strong. And one of the things that typically happens, because these guys are running extremely fast, guys and girls, extremely fast. And when you stay in a pack, whether it's in a pack of 5 or like the women today in a pack of 20 for a very long time, they use each other. And it's something that I say a lot in training on Wednesday nights, like use each other, work with each other. And that's what the elites do in these races. They really work together to stay on it. And when you're out in front, it's incredibly challenging at times to hold that same pace because you don't have the energy of the pack. You're in no man's land, basically, especially with this elite runner. And you're just out there, and it takes more energy to be alone doing something like this than being in a pack where you're helping each other get through the hills, get down the hills, and essentially hold pace too. So by the time that he crossed the finish line, I think that gap had shortened to about 90 seconds, but still one of the most incredible performances, because typically what happens is if an athlete goes out hard and fast like that, we've seen CJ Albertson do that time and time and time again. Typically those athletes end up falling apart at some point. And what I think is so cool about this story is that this runner has done that before and he has not succeeded. And today he bet on himself. He went out there, did it again, and he won the Boston Marathon. So cool. That is so inspiring. It's so amazing. And CJ Albertson was the top male. He came in at 209.53 and he ran a really strong performance. If you've been tracking marathoning, if you've been tracking the trials, you'll know that he ran CIM in December, which was like, I guess that was 4 months ago. He ran a second marathon the following weekend. I think both, it was like 207, 208 performances. I think it was actually 208, 207 performances. And then 10 weeks ago, he ran the trials, right, in Florida. And now he ran the Boston Marathon in 209.53. Incredible by him. He is a beast. Fun fact, I got to see him on his shakeout for CIM, and he ran the same 1K loop that me and the team did. The Elevate athletes that were in CIM, at CIM, we ran the same 1K loop. And, CJ's our guy. He is on TV. He looks, I think, a little bit smaller than maybe the other elite men that he runs with. But gosh, in real life, he's a lot taller than I thought. And he just looks so athletic. He looks very strong. I think he ripped. I had to look on Strava afterwards because I'm like, wow, he looks very smooth, very strong on his shakeout. What was he running? He was running a 6:09 on his shakeout run. Now, this is before CIM, right? So the 2:09 performances or the 2:08 performances, that's right around 5 minutes per mile. And I'm going to look that up really quickly to make sure I'm on target with that. But I'm pretty sure it's very close to 5 minutes per mile. It's a little bit under, actually. So it's 4:55 pace. And that hurt to say. So I might have one stride on my very best day hit 4:55 pace. It's incredible. It's so incredible. On the women's side, we had such a fun race. Emma Bates went out strong. She held the lead for quite a while in this race. She looked cool, calm, and collected. Emma Bates trains in Boulder. She is an incredible athlete. She's 31 years old. She's coming back from a really serious injury that she sustained at the Chicago Marathon. And then she was not able to rest, recover, repair in order to run the trials. So this Boston Marathon was like her A goal race of the season, right? And she looked very comfortable at the beginning. I want to say the heat probably impacted her a little bit more. It was a very warm day at Boston. Unfortunately, I've had that experience. Pretty simple, very similar temperatures, and it's tough, right? When I saw the elite women starting to pour water on themselves, maybe at the halfway point, it might have been a little bit after, I thought, yikes. Like if they're already doing that and we just have like the waves starting, or like, I don't even think everyone had started at that point, I knew it was going to get warm fast, right? So Helen took first place. Helen Aubrey, 2:22. She trains with Team On. She trains in Boulder. She's from Kenya. Emma Bates took first American at 2:27.18, I believe. Maybe 14, 2:27.14. So great to see this all play out. The women's pack looks so strong for so long, and Emma was surging and people weren't going with her. And so she would fall back into the pack, right? Just like what I was talking about with the men. like you can surge like that and you kind of hope that someone goes with you, and no one was going with her. And it takes a lot of extra energy to lead that team and to lead that group, especially up the hills. Not quite sure what happened to her during the hills, but I'm sure she'll put out a post soon or talk about it. And maybe it just was the heat. Hopefully it's not her foot, which was the issue that happened in Chicago. She looked very strong finishing the race. She looked very happy. She's still got first American female, which is really, really exciting for her. So it was a lot of fun to watch. And what I think was so cool is that the top two women, as they were just gritting it out in like the last 5K, it was really coming down. I want to say they had 2 miles to go. Again, ESPN was not doing a great job of like relaying how much further these women had, where they were on the course, kind of like I thought the Olympic trials did a much better job kind of like laying that out. I'm like, but where are they? Do they have 2 miles to go? Do they have a 2K to go? It matters, right? And also one of the announcers had no clue either, which is part of the problem. But these women were going head to head, and there was a comment that the last mile they ripped off. Now, this is after the hill, so it would have been between miles 21 and 26.2. They ripped a sub 5-minute mile. Can you even believe that? If they're averaging maybe a little bit closer to, I guess a 222 would be about, that'd have to be about 520 pace. Let's see. I'm just looking at my handy dandy chart. 530 pace. Great. 530 pace. That's amazing. And they gritted out a really strong mile to surge and surge ahead. And they had just an incredible day. It was so much fun to watch the race and soak up the inspiration and the energy from this morning. And I've been there. So I love running. And I woke up this morning and it felt like Christmas morning. I woke up early. I had a longer recovery run on the schedule today. I'm like, we got to get this thing started so I can get back by 7:30. I want to see the women start and just soak in the morning. So it was a lot of fun. I want to send a special shout out and sending a big virtual hug to Carter. Hey, Carter, you did so great. Dina, Maria, Stephanie, Judy, Janie, Nathan, and Kristen for just absolutely giving it your all today. It was so inspiring to watch and track you on the app and to see you adjust and to see you shift and pivot, and every single one of you finished. And I think on a day like today, that is a huge win. Texts were flowing through as soon as the first athlete that I coached. So I coach all of these athletes. They're part of the Elevate team. And texts started to fly through like, oh, it's so hot. It was so miserable. People were walking. People were, collapsing, right? Like that is part of a warm marathon, unfortunately. And I just had to shake my head. And it's like, yeah, like I remember that from 2021. And to be able to finish is such an amazing win. And especially on a day where you can't control the weather, you can just control your attitude and how you kind of take the race. It's, it's such an interesting place to be. I've texted with everyone, not texted with, I've texted everyone. I haven't heard back from a few, but also, rest and recovery is going to be even more important when you go through not just 26.2, but you go through Boston, which takes more out of you, and you are running in really warm temperatures. So it's like the trifecta of like rest, recovery, hydrate, rehydrate. I also want to give a special shout out to Tamana. I also coached Tamana. She was on the podcast last month. She volunteered to be part of the medical staff and medical team at the finish line. And she had texted me in the morning after the women had started, but I think it was before Wave 1 started. And she said, I'm going to have a busy day. And I knew what that meant. And that wasn't a good thing, right? If you're part of the med team at races, you want to have a quiet day. And she said it's going to be a busy day for the for the dunk tank, which is their water system to cool down an entire body quickly. So I want to give her a really big shout out for volunteering her time and energy today, helping people feel better in the midst of, one of the best days of potentially their running career. And she also gets to rest and recover and run a really strong race at London this weekend. So yay, so many great things to lean into. So I want to talk through a big day of celebration, but also 4 lessons learned through running the Boston Marathon today, or maybe running a warm race, however you want to take it. Could be both if you ran Boston today. So like I said, I've run a warm Boston. Actually, out of the 6 marathons that I've run, 4 of them have been above 55 degrees. And anytime you see, or, rule of thumb is that if it's 55 degrees or higher, pace gets to be adjusted because it's just going to be harder to run pace. And that makes sense, right? How many of us in the summertime are like, wow, everything just feels harder until we acclimate. And then even then, some days are okay and some days just aren't, right? So it's one of the things that it's tough, right? It's very, very tough to go into a marathon and having it be warm and on the warmer side to start. I'm pretty sure it was close to 60 degrees by the time the elites started, and they were splashing water on themselves. So, and that's not something they typically do. They like to stay tucked in. They really like to stay and conserve their energy as much as possible. So if they're reaching for volunteer cups, not their bottle, or like Emma Bates was actually using her hydration bottle to cool off, like it's a warm day, right? So I have a lot of experience running warm marathons, which is unfortunate. And I know I can empathize with every single person that ran today. My first Boston, second marathon, was in the fall of 2021. And it was very similar weather. It was a little bit warmer at the start, but the swing in temperature wasn't as great. So when I finished, it was above 70, but it had started around 66 degrees and it was humid AF. Humid. I was completely soaked through my entire race kit by the first 5K. It was wild. And so I kind of understand when everyone's texting and I'm seeing the splits come through, like the experience, right? But here are some lessons to learn and that we can take away and apply to our racing. One is weather, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. It's the ebb and flow of running and racing applies to all of us. So the ebb and flow of running and racing apply to all of us. And this came through after the first male to finish Boston crossed the finish line today in 2:06:18. Incredible performance. He fell to the ground. He was just in awe. He was just so happy. He hung on and he did it. And he didn't let that huge gap. Remember, I talked about him at the very beginning of the episode. Lemmy, he went out and he shooted his shot. And he went out there and gave it his all and it paid off. And what I love so much about this is that the commentators did share his story of this is, I believe, his 4th Boston Marathon. He is like a 2:02 marathoner, to put this into context. So he ran a 2:06:18 on a warm day in Boston. That tracks for sure. His first Boston, he DNF'd. His second Boston, I remember this, he DNF'd. Pretty sure he was the one that went out hot and hard in the very beginning of, that would have been 2022. And he ended up using the porta potty around mile 21, staggered out, and just completely cramped up and couldn't run again. I'm pretty sure this is the same guy. Last year, he got 30th place. Okay, so put this into context. If this was you, let's say you went into a marathon, You went into a race. It doesn't even have to be a marathon. You DNF'd, and then you placed 30th, and you're like looking to place top 3. And you go into your 4th Boston. You bet on yourself. You know there's ebb and flow of running and racing. You trust your training. You have confidence, and you do it. And he got 1st place. Huge for his career. It's huge for his family. They talked about how he has 2 kids. He's a husband. Like, there's a lot of like things I think a lot with these runners that we don't necessarily think about. $150,000 purse prize. Hello. That's so nice. And I think it's so important to see the ebb and flow of running, training, and racing. It applies to all of us. It doesn't have to be just us mere mortals, the amateurs over here, right? This also applies to elites, and how after 3 extremely tough races, these aren't even, I don't even know if you could compare it to like, wow, he placed 4th or he placed 10th, right? Like my coaches said, like, no one cares unless you podium or you're my mom, right? Like, so she kind of put it in that context when she races. Like, if she doesn't podium, it doesn't really matter to basically everyone, right? So that would be like sponsors and races and whatever. So that's the standard he's held to. And then when you think about 2 DNFs, placing 30th, and you're like, okay, I finished, but I also placed 30th. And then you go out in year 4 and shoot your shot. There we go. And absolutely crush it. That is running. That is training. That is the ebb and flow of everything that we do. And I think it feels, at least on my side of things, when they said that, I was like, aha, that is something we get to talk about today, because that is such a foundational lesson. And if you can't embrace that, you won't be able to sustain in this sport. And I think that's a fact. I don't think that's subjective. I've seen athletes come and go. I've seen athletes train year round over and over and over, year after year. And the athletes that have a bit more of that flexibility, that can ebb and flow with taking the wins on tough days and shooting their shot on the days that they feel good, or shooting their shot every single day and seeing what happens, are the athletes that get to see the fruits of their labor pay off, right? And that's really what happened today. So inspiring. And I think it's really important, if you've been in that season of having some really great races, really good training cycles, and then maybe you don't have a great race, or 2, if you're watching the video, waving right now, or you don't have what feels like a strong training cycle. I think what happened today is so much motivation and inspiration to keep going and to trust yourself, right? I talked about in last week's episode how my last training cycle just didn't feel great, and the race felt good until it didn't feel good. And I was a little worried, like, because I know my body and I know how I feel, and it just didn't feel the same as being tired. There was like an extra layer of something going on, right? That extra something was stress. And I took last week basically off from running. I ran 15 miles all at the end of the week. So it's 3, 3, 4, 5. Each run felt a little bit better each day, but I didn't overdo it, and just really wanted to get back into some routine. And then this week definitely picks up. I'm like basically back up to like where we are, but I also feel good. I feel like myself, and that's a huge win, right? The ebb and flow of training, the ebb and flow of how we feel, the ebb and flow of racing, it all matters. But I think as long as you stay true to yourself, right? You really evaluate how you're feeling, what's normal and what's not normal. I knew the last month of training was not normal for me, right? I knew that. But I did what I needed to do to rest and feel better. And thankfully, knock on wood, because it would be nice to have a full week of feeling good. I really hope that this is like I'm on an upward trend, right? But you don't know until you go through it. I think it's really powerful to lean into not just trusting yourself, but then trusting the training, trusting extra rest, knowing that if you continue to show up and do all the things that you can, that control aspect, which is a slippery slope, but it's there. That control aspect, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. It's one of the things that at some point your North Star will be reached. It's just a matter of time, right? For this elite runner, finishing first place, it took him 4 Boston marathons. Who knows what was in between that, because I didn't have time to do research. Who knows what else he's been up to? I don't know. But that is such an inspiring message. His message. When you don't succeed, try and try again. Asterisk, honor your body. When you know something's off, hit pause for sure. But that ebb and flow of running and how it applies to all of us is so cool. Elites are just like us. They are probably a little more genetically gifted than us. They definitely, studies have shown that they have a higher tolerance of pain, which makes sense. And what my coach has shared about the marathon is that, what she shared about the marathon, and this applies to her, obviously, but also to anyone who's running, is the faster you get in that distance, the harder it gets earlier into the race, right? And then you just have to like hold that like threshold of what you can run. Pretty wild, huh? All right, lesson number 2. The marathon doesn't owe us anything. Now, this is going to be weather edition. So, like I mentioned earlier, if maybe you didn't watch the Boston Marathon, or you're looking on Instagram and you're like, wow, everyone has great pictures, because that was the one thing crossing my mind today. I was like, well, last year I ran a rainy, colder marathon and my pictures are terrible. The warm marathon that I ran at Boston, my pictures are awesome. So I'm pretty sure everyone's going to have great pictures. If that's maybe the silver lining in all of this, I don't know. But the pictures are flowing through on Instagram and it looks like, a beautiful day for pictures. Like AccuWeather mentioned, throughout the whole weekend, it was a beautiful day for baseball and a warm day for the marathon. And I was like, it's actually really funny that they put that on the AccuWeather site, but also like sigh, like, oh, that's so tough. So on any given day, the marathon doesn't owe us anything, right? Doesn't owe us anything. And that is going to come true for all of us. We can do everything that we can do in training. I had 8 super fit athletes start Boston this week. Super fit. I had athletes saying, I haven't felt this good ever. I am ready to go. I have my hydration. I have my handheld. I'm wearing a light race kit. I'm doing everything I can do to make this thing happen. And no one ran their A goal race, which is absolutely fine. I think at Boston, it's a 50-50 chance anyways. But when you throw in heat at Boston, oh my gosh, it's terrible, right? I think it's either going to be a great day for runners or it's a great day for spectators. And today was a great day for spectators, right? When you see the pros splashing water all over their body from the volunteers, it's a warm one, right? You could see it on their faces. And they're running much earlier than the masses, right? So my last athlete, she crossed the line around 3 o'clock Eastern time, and the elites finished at, they started at 9:47, 11:47. So like a little bit after noon. It's a huge difference, right? I was thinking to myself when that last athlete crossed, I thought, oh, the hour by hour forecast shows it's starting to cool down now. Like, that sucks, right? Um, so after the 2021 fall Boston Marathon, so this was because of the pandemic. The 2021 April Boston was pushed to the fall because of the pandemic, and it was a warm day, 66 degrees ish at the start. I finished a little bit over 70 degrees. And on the SWAP podcast that year, it was probably the next week or the week after, David and Megan Roche were talking about the impact of weather and heat and how greatly it impacts our race. And the example that they used was a 3-hour marathoner. Okay. So you have to take this into context of, if you're going to compare this maybe to like a half marathon, it would be like a 90-minute half marathoner. And then you can kind of adjust the data as you need. So a 3-hour marathoner could expect to see 10 minutes added to their day based on temperatures above 55 degrees. And I started talking about that at the beginning of the episode. 55 degrees is kind of that threshold, right? I run warm. I think that's no secret at this point in time. If you've been listening for maybe a week, I run very warm. And I ran the Chicago Marathon in 2022 and it was 47 degrees. And I think by the time I finished, it was like 54, 55. And at that point for me, I was done. I was like, I don't want it any warmer. And if you're starting a marathon above 55 degrees, oh, it's so tough. It's so tough because the core body temperature is going to be higher at the start. Your heart rate's going to be elevated. There's only so much you can do. And then when you're moving around for 3+ hours, it's only going to get harder. And as the temperature increases, right? So if you were a 4-hour marathoner, maybe you could add 13 minutes to your day. So I think it's a way to kind of help put things into perspective of how tough today was. I tracked, nearly 30 people and no one ran the race they were going out for. And that's okay. It's Boston. I didn't run my races either. And I have to say that course, that experience, I really hope, I'm not really getting this vibe from anyone, but I'm hoping that the experience of Boston is enough to take away from the discomfort of the race, right? When I finished mine in 2021, I immediately said I was never running a marathon again. And I mean, I was like so happy to finish. And I was also like terrified of what I had just gone through. And 48 hours later, I had signed up for my next one, right? That's how it works. So there are things that we can control on race day, and there are things that we just can't control on race day. And in this case, the weather was a huge issue for everyone. I haven't seen one person that said like, "Oh, the weather was fine. It didn't impact me," right? Didn't impact my pace at all. So if we're going into a warm weather race, now we're just getting into spring racing. With global warming, I think this is going to be a trend more and more that like races will have the potential to be warmer and warmer. Like Jersey City Marathon was yesterday or on Sunday the 14th. I had good friend, Elevate athlete Jesse run it and it was warm. The temperature came down from what it looked like earlier in the week, but it was still too warm. And that does take its toll. So here are some things that you can do when you're going into a warmer weather race to make it feel a little bit easier that you're in control, right? Because that's kind of what it's about. You want to make sure that you're hydrating extra that week, but primarily the day before and then the day of. So I like to hydrate with Scratch electrolytes. The hyperhydration, I know they discontinued that product. They have something very similar with the same sodium levels. It has about 1,700 milligrams of sodium. That is what I use when it's warm and I'm in training runs. So this could apply to training runs too. Or on race day. It's awesome, especially as someone who is, I'm a warmer runner. I sweat more. I need more of those electrolytes and that sodium and that salt. That's amazing. So you can take it the day before. Marathon morning, first thing, wake up, I drink 10 ounces of water with electrolytes before coffee. That's awesome. You want to bring a handheld with you, be able to fill it up on the course. And I think if there's a way to I know Boston did this in 2021, but like it's all based on your comfort levels of like what you want to take from spectators. So I know spectators had cold fruit and like cold water that they were handing out in 2021. My guess is that also happened today, or sponges and ways to like cool your system down. So that could be your forehead, that could be the back of your neck, having maybe people out there, your friends, your family out there on the course, having like cold things to give you, and maybe even just cooling down your hands, that, or the palms of your hands. That could be a great way to just lower the body temperature, even just slightly for a few minutes, right? Taking a cold shower in the morning, yikes, that's going to wake you up, but it also does help drop your core body temperature. And I know that's tough, especially for a race like Boston, where there's such a huge gap in time. It's about maybe 4.5 hours from the time you leave your hotel room until you start the race, but it could help. I was suggesting to athletes this last week to like not take throwaway clothes, but not wear them. Keep their core body temperature as low as possible, because we knew it was going to be a warm day last week, right? It was just a matter of like, how warm was it going to be? Taking in extra gels is a game changer. It's probably one of the toughest things to do, because anytime you're running in the heat and you're running a tough course or a tough race, or you're just like so warm and feeling like you're bonking, we don't want to take in fuel, right? How many times have you run like a warm training run and you're like, I have zero appetite? But we actually burn through more glycogen when it's warmer. So we need more. And that's so tough. So that's kind of where like the Scratch hydration can come in, or your electrolytes, if you like Tailwind or maybe another kind. And this can be amazing because it gives you the calories and the carbohydrates that your body probably needs to get through this race. And then, of course, the fourth thing is adjusting your pace. And this is a tough pill to swallow, because when you're going into a race and you've prepped, you've prepared, you feel really good, you're ready to go, your legs are poppy, and you have to adjust your pace down because the effort's going to feel the same, but the pace is going to be slower. That sucks, right? That doesn't feel good. But really, that mindset or that like shift gets to happen, because what's going to happen is like you have the choice. You could go out at race pace, and like we saw today, no one held it. No one like that I saw. If you ran Boston and like absolutely crushed the pacing, I'd love to hear from you. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and your mindset and all that stuff. But I feel like you're going out at race pace, it's going to come around and bite you and haunt you somewhere down the line, right? I went out way too hot at Boston 2021. I started to feel it at mile 10, feel it as in like my pace dropped by like 30, 40 seconds, and then just started to get slower and slower and slower. It's a long 16 miles. And on that course, it's a very long 16 miles because it's the hardest part of the course. So you have to and get to adjust pace. And it gets to be this compromise of saying, okay, self, I'm adjusting pace. This isn't what we want, but it is going to lead to finishing the race stronger. I think when you can put it and put it in that mindset and shift your mindset that way, it's a little bit easier to swallow, knowing that like you can still run a strong race. Lesson number 3 is learning to let go. Oh, how many of us need to hear this lesson? I know I do. I can get so fixated on what I want to do. It's very hard for me to shift. It's hard for me to shift in training. It's hard for me to shift on race day until like I'm forced to. It's very, very tough. And it's something where I'm really good with the ebb and flow of like chunks of time. Like, okay, that training cycle was a win, but maybe this race didn't work out, but there's so many wins. I'm going to keep on going. But when I'm in like the more micro aspect of training, like the day to day, wanting to hit the splits, doing exactly what's on my schedule, that is like very hard for me. And learning to let go and to let things be is probably one of the best lessons we can take from today. So one of the athletes I coach, one of the runners, Dina, she texted, we were texting back and forth, and she said she went out at goal pace, maybe a little bit slower, but goal pace. She said she knew by mile 7, she couldn't do it and she needed to pull back. And she said she made the decision at mile 7 to shift, run on effort, and I wanted to take in the experience. And this made my heart so happy because this is the ultimate lesson, everyone. I get to learn from Dina too. She knew very early on, with like 19 miles to go, she wasn't going to be able to hold it. And instead of getting upset or instead of getting down, she's like, I'm just going to run slower. It's still going to be amazing. And I want to soak in Boston or soak in what I'm doing today. She ran strong. She had great splits, slower, but great, strong, consistent. She was happy. She didn't let the heat bog her down too much. Episode 116 was a great episode with Emily Saul. She is a sports psychology coach, and she was educating us about the power of making decisions on the course and having control over it and making it worthwhile. And I think that is what Dina did it. Dina nailed this. Like, to me, I've worked with Dina for over 2 years. We started working together for her first Boston prep. So that would have been probably, I think it was like fall of 21, because she ran Boston 22 and then she got to run Boston 24, and which was also today. And this is the ultimate lesson. She was able to say, self, this isn't happening today. I'm going to shift in the moment and be happy and be grateful. Because how many times are we running and we want so badly for an outcome to happen or for an experience to feel a certain way, or we go into a situation with high expectations? I'm guilty of that. That it almost turns everything into like a Debbie Downer moment when it doesn't pan out. And she could have very easily like got down on herself, got down that she wasn't going to be Q again, and just been like in the dumps about it. Negative mindset while running. Well, what happens when that happens, right? We don't run as well. We fall apart. We make it a miserable experience. Instead, Dina totally shifted this and she ran really well. And she ran a course PR, which was amazing. She took in the experience. And that's incredible. So when we have decisions on the course and we are able to make those decisions and be at peace with those decisions, I think there's a lot of growth that happens, not just in that moment, but in future training cycles. I think this is going to be, I know this is going to be my process goal for the summer. So I can have it and be fully embraced with letting go when I jump into marathon training later in the summer. How cool is that? How cool is that? Think back to a race where things weren't aligning. You couldn't control something happening. And how did you shift? How did you pivot? How did you make it a win, or how did things go? Right? When I ran Boston 21, I was like, what the heck? And it wasn't like a great experience running. I mean, it was on some level, but I know like I felt so crappy, right? And Dina could have channeled that. Runners could have channeled that today, but instead, the shifting and letting go presented itself. And I think that's so cool. So if you haven't listened to episode 116 with Emily Saul, highly recommend it. It's called the Art of Creating a Strong Mindset. We talk specifically about taper, race week, and some key pieces to running Boston well. Because Emily has run Boston. She's from Boston. She's a sports performance coach. She's taking on new athletes. There are a few Elevate athletes who work with her right now. I should say a couple. And she's awesome at what she does. She takes virtual athletes, and it's amazing to see the shift in these athletes. Dina's not one of them. Dina did this on her own, which makes it even more special. And it's also okay to have a team of people to help you get to where you're going, because that is part of running, right? But it was a really great episode. If you haven't listened to that, highly encourage you to, or maybe it's worth listening to it a second time and maybe picking up an extra nugget or two that you didn't catch the first time. Lesson number 4 is to soak it all in and be grateful for the day, whatever the day gives you. The ability to move, the ability to have time to travel race or take a morning to race, the finances involved in racing. In my experience, the Boston Marathon is one of the most expensive races to attend. I think all the majors are just expensive in general, but Boston for me is always the weekend that is more than other weekends. And maybe it's just how I do Boston, but finances play a role. The ability to be able to run races, the ability to train, the ability for the training tools that we have, and having shoes and having running clothes, right? And for that daily movement, it's such a gift. And I think we may or may not realize that. I think anytime we go through maybe a tough race or a tough training cycle, it can be easy to forget this. But this is one of the best lessons to really lean into when things feel hard and when things feel great, right? Just the attitude of gratitude. It's something that we can definitely take for granted, but that we shouldn't. We get to do this. You know, you see those signs out on the course that say, like, you paid to be here. Happens every race. And I have to laugh every single time because it's like so true. We don't just pay for the race, but like the travel, the training, all the gear. Like there's so much that goes into this. I spend so much money on running. It is wild every month. Like it is ridiculous. It can be an expensive hobby. It can be very gratifying and very like satisfying too. Being grateful for the ability to move and being healthy enough to do it is one lesson I hope we all kind of lean into and embrace and love before, maybe the universe gives us something to really make us want to be able to do this, right? So soak it in, be grateful that you get to be here, you get to do this. And that will give you so much joy and happiness along the way that even if things do get tough, whether that's in training or a full training cycle or on race day, you can assess the wins. You can assess what worked, what didn't work, and just have gratitude for the experience because we do get to do this and not everyone gets to do this. after the race, I think it's such an important piece to let the emotions flow, to start journaling about how you're feeling, but then also take a look back on what truly worked. What did I really nail this time around? And where were there a few little holes lurking that I can button up for the next training cycle? Ultimately, all of these lessons are going to take you into a new place. And maybe that's running a Boston qualifying marathon. Maybe that's running Boston 2025. Maybe it's running your first race. Or maybe you're thinking about training consistently or going out for your first run and you stumbled on this podcast and now you're wondering, well, what can I do? What is my potential? And that's so cool. I feel so inspired by today. I hope you do too. What an incredible day for the running community and for the sport of running. And this day gets to be celebrated. It gets to be celebrated by all of us because people went out and worked really hard and made their dreams come true today. And I think that is so cool. If you're looking to train for a fall race or train in general, and you're looking for a coach, I'd love to help you. I have 3 one-on-one coaching spots that just opened up, and 'tis the season for a lot of ebb and flow in coaching. So if you want to feel supported in your next training cycle, and feel elevated on race day, I would absolutely love to chat with you and see if it's a good fit. You can reach out over Instagram or my website contact form, or just send me a quick email at Sarah, SARA, at elevateyourrunning.com. Thank you so much for listening this week. I really appreciate you. I appreciate everything that you contribute to the running community, and I will see you next week. Bye.